Hey crew, Coach here. Hey, first time back, and I hope you do not hear it in my voice, but probably about, I don't know, 65, 70% back from the COVID bed. Can't imagine what it would have been like had Maestro and I not been vaccinated, because we didn't get Omicron. We got something far more serious, and it leveled us pretty darn good. But hey, that's why I'm not here to talk to you about that. We're here to talk to you about landscape edging. Landscape edging this week. We did do a podcast on it, so don't forget to check that out. If you're out driving and running and doing your thing, check out the podcast. But landscape edging is a kind of a luxury item. You know, I've traveled around this country quite a bit, and some places have it and some places don't. Let's look into it, shall we? Feeling a little bit edgy? Yep, let's get started. Hey, I'm Matt. You can call me Coach. Every Friday I bring with me landscape DIY education, concepts and theories, ideas and solutions, so you guys can go out and tackle a landscape project yourself, get professional results, save a whole lot of money in the process, and in this day and age, be a lot more self-reliant. Man, after a 20-plus year career in the green industry, I'm bringing with me a lot of knowledge and experience that I want to share with you guys, the new, modern, educated, self-reliant homeowner of today. So, having traveled about the good old US of A quite a bit lately, I take in a lot of landscapes. I take it in for knowledge base, content ideas, styles, some not so styles, and kind of take an inventory on landscape edging lately. And I'm noticing that it's, honestly, it's kind of a West Coast thing. There's not a lot of it. Now, some of the houses that I saw back on the East Coast, they did have it, but it was very small scale yards, and it's not as prevalent. And I'll probably discuss one reason why that is. But how about you guys? Do you guys have edging in any way, shape, or form? Do you kind of look at it as the old edging that just divides the lawn and the planting beds? Do you have other uses for it? We will talk about that today. You know, over the years, I've incorporated probably, I don't know, 4 or 5, maybe 6 styles of edging in the landscapes that I've done. Landscape edging comes in several forms, and there's costs attached to each and every one of them. So it kind of depended on what the budget was. You know, some of my higher end clients, they got nice cement edging. The really nice clients even got fancy edging that was either colored or colored and stamped and really looked nice. Kind of matched some of the motif of driveways and walkways and stuff. The more budgetary, fiscally conscientious customers that I had either no edging at all, or maybe they had composite or wood, one or the other. But how do you guys feel about edging? Is it in your repertoire? Is it something that you think you guys could put in yourself? Do you have it now? And if so, how does it look? Do me a favor. Let's do some incorporation on this channel. Drop me a comment. Give me a thumbs up. And let me know exactly how edging fits into your landscape motif. You know, in my humble landscape designer, landscape contractor, educated in ornamental horticulture type of opinion, I kind of define landscape edging as something that is organic or inorganic, and it divides one particular portion of the landscape from the other. And we generally always think about lawn and planting beds, but it can also divide things like walkways and planting beds, different color of rock or different textures of gravel sizes, and there's all kinds of things that edging can play a part into. So is it a necessity? I'll tell you right now, no, it is not a necessity. Is it a luxury? It can be, depending on how fancy you make it. So why do we use edging? Well, I think it kind of boils down to a couple of reasons. First of all, edging is regional. It really is. Like I told you, I didn't see a whole lot back east, and I see a whole lot out west. So it's kind of regional. Why is that? Well, I think it boils down to it's just been done this way. You know, it's just kind of a cultural or a historic type of way of landscaping. In the West, especially in production work, you know, the old rubber stamp suburbia front yard landscapes that you see out on the West Coast a lot, you know, they get an edging. It's generally a 1x4 composite edging or something. Maybe some of the model homes get a little more upgraded. But for the most part, it's just the way things are done. And it always has to do with separation. It really does, nothing more. A lot of the stuff that I saw in the Midwest, upper Midwest, back east, down south, a lot of it had to do with no edging at all. The edging was generally the barrier between the mowed, shall I say, turf area. It was really almost au naturel. It wasn't a real ornamental type of grass, and ma nature. And the edging was just the difference between mowed and unmowed a lot of the times. I think the biggest turf area I ever saw driving around lately has probably been about 3 acres of mowed, manicured stuff, and it obviously did not have an edging. I mean, can you imagine? You know, can you imagine you would have to have the dollars of Gates, Bezos, or Musk in order to throw a 12-inch edging down around 3 acres, you know, and then landscape to that. Because for the most of us, especially us DIYers, you know, that is a little financially out of reach, unless you hit 6 out of 6 with a bonus number. So when you talk about the materials that are used, you can kind of conjure up just based on your own knowledge base. You know, you have cement edging, you have wood edging, you have maybe brick edging, you have composite edging, you have metal edging. And did I say wood already? I don't remember. Did I say wood? I think so. And in some cases you have organic type of edgings like cobblestones. So being a luxury item, how much would you put into it? It's all a matter of return on investment. If you have a relatively small front and backyard, you don't have anything big, most of the time your edgings, with a little exception, most of your edgings are going to be your patios, your walkways, your driveways, and then maybe a little bit that goes out into your yard that encompasses your turf area and divides it from your planter bed area. Not a lot of linear feet, certainly not. And it's just kind of a bold landscape statement, and also helps you on maintaining the turf area. The bigger your yard is, the less likely you're going to probably put edging in. I can remember putting in edging around 10 to 15,000 square feet of turf, and that was a composite edging. So that's probably about the biggest I ever edged, so to speak. And some of the bigger turf areas that I did that were 16 to 25,000 square feet, they didn't have any edging. And the turf that I put in was not a running type of turf. It was a fescue turf, so it kind of stayed where it was. It would require edging once a month, you know, just to keep it nice and neat. But for the most part, no edging was necessary then. So let's talk about a few of the materials. Let's start off with cement. Might as well talk about the priciest stuff first, right? So cement comes in 2 forms when it comes with edging. You have your usual form and pour type of edging, where you put boards in or form boards, and then you pour it in, finish it, and pull the forms. And then there's the mechanically placed formed cement curbing, which really doesn't have a lot of aggregates in it. It's mostly Portland cement and sand. But it does a good job, and it all depends on how you put it in. From a do-it-yourself angle, cement edging is something you can do rather easy. The form and pour method, that is. Now, unless you have a mixer, something like similar to a stucco mixer, if you have the machine, which I'll show you right here, okay? Unless you have the machine, the form curbing is probably not something you're going to be doing. But hey, you know, when Maestro and I Weed Patch Ranch, I did all my own edging. I had some friends help me pour it, but for the most part, it was all form and pour because I wanted it very sturdy because it was going to be, the mower was going to be on it. I even considered a ride-on mower, which I did not do. But basically the form and pour. Now, what are some of the drawbacks to cement type edging, whether it be the curved, molded, placed type of curbing or the cement? Well, the pros is that it can be very permanent, very, very permanent. It can stay there for a millennia. But the cons of it is, depends on where you live. It depends on your soil conditions. It depends on the maintenance you put to it. And it also depends on the cost. The cost can be rather pricey, especially if you're having someone do it yourself. You could probably figure some regions would be as much as $10 a foot. The curbing, the last time I had it done in, it was right around 6-ish, 7-ish a foot. So, you know, you're paying for that, but you also pay for permanence. Now, what are some of the drawbacks that I've seen? Is the curbing is unreinforced most of the time. It is basically, like I said, Portland cement and sand. So it has that ability to expand and contract, even though they put cold joints in it. But it's also very susceptible to root and frost heave, which can cause it to buckle or cause it to shift. And that can be kind of problematic. So if you do go down this route, make sure that you reinforce your curbing and your edging, either with fiberglass for the curbing, or you can do like 3/8 rebar for your edging. Make sure that if you're doing form and pour that you do a minimum of 9 inches. I've seen it as narrow as 6 inches, but then I've seen the problems come about. 9 inches is kind of a minimum. I really like the 12-inch edging, especially if you have a larger turf area. And don't forget about the patios and walkways. They're going to end up dividing and being your edging that way as well. Coming from the back patio and a walkway that goes to the front yard, and you know, you've got beds on one side and lawn on the other. There's a big, big edging right there. So think about that. Moving on, let's talk about wood. Wood edging has been around for a long, long time. It has to be a particular type of wood. I don't suggest untreated wood. I do suggest a pressure-treated type of wood. Do you have a little chemical transition in the soil? Yeah, you do. But you can also use things like dimensional lumber of cedar, redwood. Redwood's pretty expensive, and cedar is too, but it does work well. And you also kind of limit yourself then to any sort of rectilinear or angular type of landscape, whether it be turf or whatever, because it doesn't flex a whole lot, unless you get the old bender board, and that stuff is long since gone by the wayside. So wood is practical, especially on a small scale, and it has a lifetime. It has a lifespan, depending on what type of soil you have. Lots of organisms and stuff in your soil, more clay and clay loam type of soils, you're going to have deterioration over time. And there's, you know, wood-eating organisms like termites and those kinds of things. When I was talking wood, I used to use, especially if we were doing angular type of things, 4x4. I did use some 2x4s, but they, you know, it's a little cheesy. You know, it can be kind of cheesy. So give yourself a little bit of a 4x4, 6x6s. I even used to use railroad ties many, many years ago, but they're way too expensive and harder to find nowadays. But yeah, even you know, cut dimensional railroad ties made a heck of an edging. It wouldn't rot out as easy. Okay, so moving on, one that is not used out west nearly as much, but I have seen it a little bit back east and in some of the Midwest, and that is metal edging. Metal edging comes in a very thin 10, 12, and 20-foot lengths. They're probably about 4 inches, 3.5 inches wide, and very, very narrow, as much as like 1/8 of an inch. And they kind of interlock, and you can use that. So what are the pluses for metal? Well, it's pretty readily available, and it lasts for a great deal of time. It's not going to rust out in 5 years like maybe wood might. But once you get it in the ground and you get it to grade and you put in mulch on one side and turf on the other, and it kind of disappears. It's not a highly defined type of edging, and sometimes that can be a drawback when you're mowing. You can't always get right up to the edging, because if you put it to grade and it's not sticking up very much, you have that up against the side of it, or you're trying to ride on top of it. When you got something that's, you know, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch thick, It's hard to do. And sometimes you get mower strikes and damage and bending and blade deterioration from your mower. I didn't use it that often. I probably used it in a total of maybe 6 times. It wasn't my favorite. I liked having the edging being more of a definitive part of the landscape. So there is metal edging, and you can find that at box stores sometimes and specialty shops most all the time. All right, moving on. One that I used a lot over the years, and they have some pros and they have some cons, and that's the composite edging. It comes from the company called Epic, and no, I am not sponsored by them, but if they happen to watch this, they can always reach out to me. Epic was born out of the reduce, reuse, recycle phase of the landscape industry. And they basically used recycled plastics with a little bit of colorant in it. And through a heat extruded process, they would kick out 20-foot 1x4s with lap edgings that you could put together. And they came in either 2x4 size or 1x4 size. And they came in tan, they came in brown. I think that's the only colors, tan, brown. I don't remember a green, but relatively cost effective. The only drawback that I found is if you use the composite stakes that came with it, is they did a good job initially, but through cold and heat and water and dry, they tended to want to lift up out of the ground. And so you'd have to go back and tap them back in, restake them at a different spot. And you had to do this about every 3 to 5 years. Plus then if you used wooden stakes, then your stakes were rotting out after a few years and you had to replace those. But for the most part, I used a double layer of the 1x4. The 2x4s were $35 per 20-foot length, $35. So in some cases they were kind of expensive, but they were also really hard to work with because it was very heavy, and the lap edges, I think I hear wings. The lap edgings were kind of flimsy, so you would screw them together, you try to reinforce them, and if you got the 2x4 into any, not a tight radius, but a curved radius, sometimes those lap joints they'd break on you. And then you'd have to try to cut another one, and it was really kind of frustrating. So I used the 1x4s, and I often doubled them instead. That worked out a lot better. Remember to put in a whole row of your first composite edging, and then come back and do the outside or the inside one, because the radiuses, don't put them together and try to put them down, because you have different lengths depending on outside or inside. Anyway, composites. All right, what's another one? Costly one is brick. You could use brick, lay them horizontal, and have an edging in the back like that, and then reinforce it with either a mortar bed behind it, or you can compact dirt, depending on the soil that you have. You can compact dirt on it. Brick, kind of expensive in this day and age, 50 cents a brick, depending how big an area. You can also do brick as far as laying it flat on a rough cement edging if you want to have a nice, maybe you have a brick facade of one kind or another, and you're going to make, you know, the edging the same kind. Nice way to tie landscape into dwelling. Okay, so there you go, landscape edging. A very useful tool, a very decorative tool, in some cases a luxury tool in the landscape toolbox. It is just one more useful element in the landscape that you can use in yours. Very easy DIY project, just a little time consuming. One thing I want to leave you with, that if you do have curbing poured for you, I suggest doing a little bit of excavation on the perimeter of your turf area or whatever you're dividing, and kind of sink that edging down just a little bit to grade, especially if you're doing turf. I used to do that, piss my curbing guys off, but had to do it, excavate it down a little bit. They'll generally put it onto a sand bed and firm everything down, and then I would backfill soil to the edge, so my turf area for my customer was at grade, and not, you didn't have edging here and turf down here, and you're trying to mow that edge, and it looks silly, it really did. Hey, that's all I have for you today. I'm glad to be back mostly. You could probably hear it in my voice. But hey, check out some of the other educational videos and the plan of the week. Don't forget the podcast if you're on the go. I appreciate your attention, I really do. As always, to your landscape success, Go out there and get a little edgy. Make sure your landscape looks as good as possible. And I will catch you guys next week. Thank you very much. Take care.